Hello, listeners. Welcome to our English program podcast, Kaleidoscope. Listeners, if you remember, in our last program, we had an interview with Priyam Redican Chakne, a poet, educator, translator, and amateur illustrator. And in our today's program, we have a special poetry performance by her in which she has translated poems written by Savitribai Phule. This set of poems also includes a couple of poems written by Priyam Redican herself. So let us listen to Kavya Phule, a collection of poems written by Savitribai Phule and narrated and translated by Priyam Redican Chakne.
Have you ever stood facing a mountain when the sun is about to rise from behind its dawn-lit silhouette? Have you noticed how, as the stars start to fade from the black, trees and bushes appear on the landscape? First, they're just blotches of green, of brown, of yellow, and then you see the finer details, the cracks in the rocks, the twist of the branches, the dusty lines of the goat trails. And before you know it, the night is gone and everything above is blue, sweet morning blue. And then you recognize God as a master painter and wonder that He made these looming mountains to bring out the light of the sky. You see, I am Ghati. I was born to these benevolent mountains, sitting magnificent and humble against the vast expanse of infinity. Where I come from, our horizon is never a horizontal line. It is multiple irregular ones, meeting and intersecting like heartbeats transposed on paper by an ECG. Our mother is the earth and father the blessed sky, and we worship the meditative mountains that define and separate the two. We love them, pray to them when our hearts need courage, never afraid that our prayers won't be heard because our language isn't clean. Like anything beautiful, our language is flawed. It isn't perfect, yet our mountains hear us. Have you ever spoken to the mountains? You call me Ghati, but do you know the Ghats? If you have never been sublimed by their spirit, transported by their beauty, you have yet to live. At the tender age of 17, Savitribai, along with her husband Jyotiba, founded India's first native-run school for girls at the Bhidewada in Pune. This was undoubtedly at least a turning point, if not the beginning of the Indian movement for women's liberation. At 18, this courageous young woman, along with Fatima Sheikh, another important name in the modern Indian feminist movement, opened a school for Shudra and Atishudra adults in Usman Sheikh, Fatima's brother's Vada, also in Pune. This was another event that changed the course of Indian history, especially since this was done at a time when challenging the caste system was considered equal to challenging God. The establishment of these institutions was the foundation that Savitribai built her life's work upon. It is here she became not only India's first female teacher, but also headmistress. And this was only the beginning. Savitribai went on to establish the Mahila Seva Mandal to raise awareness about women's rights. She also started the country's first infanticide prohibition home, an evil we strive to eradicate even today. Throughout her life, she fought to help improve the lives of destitute women, widows, and child brides. She built shelters and set up schools for them. she devoted her life to the service of the oppressed in not only providing them with the opportunity of an education, but also apprising them about the need and the importance of one. In her poem, The Dependence of the Shudras, she addresses this. Savitribai's writing is an unusual and unique account of history, an account written by a Shudra, or more importantly, by a Shudra woman. While there is no doubt of the sheer greed and inhumanity of the British Empire in its treatment of the Indian population, which was especially evident in their total lack of responsibility during the plague which ended up taking Savitribai's life, there is also the other side of the coin, the side where the British were actually a sign of hope and emancipation for certain oppressed segments of Indian society, the Shudras, Dalits, and women in general. While the political revolution for freedom from the British, parts of the social movement took on the British, and in the case of Savitribai, the missionaries, as allies. Savitribai speaks of this in her poem, Wake Up to Learn. Manu and the Peshwas have bitten the dust. This is the British Empire. It has risen to free knowledge from Manu's shackles, she writes. The British are here to impart knowledge. Do learn from them. A fortuity like this has not occurred in the last 1,000 years. Here is a woman who went door to door convincing Shudras and Dalits to send their daughters to school. A woman who was pelted with stones and cow dung in doing this duty towards her people. A woman who not only kept her chin up but also her heart open through all of it. Here is, in the truest sense, a saint. And the following collection of poems, Kavya Phule, is her hagiography in verse, or if you can read the original in Marathi, in song. For a lot of the poems are written in the form of ovis that are meant to be sung. The collection is an eclectic mix of topics ranging from nature poems about jasmine flowers and butterflies to poems about historical figures like Queen Tarabai and Chhatrapati Shivaji. But what stood out most for me as a translator and an aspiring poet myself are her spiritual poems. Take poem 29, for instance, titled Prayer. She writes, By smearing shendur mixed with oil upon a rock, you make it home for deities. It is but a rock. This is a powerful statement to make even today, let alone in the 19th century India. In the fourth line, she goes on to say, Stones answer prayers, they grant children. Why do men and women marry then? But what really hits home is the ending. Savitri speaks, one must think in order to attain enlightenment. At a time when the Brahmins were busy propagating rituals and customs of hate and segregation, Savitribai had the power not only to fight this propaganda, but to go one step further and talk about education and self-realization, which makes her writing not only relevant but vital in this day and age. Which is why perhaps in 2014, more than a century after her passing, the once University of Pune was renamed Savitribai Phule Pune University in her honor. This was a big step towards giving India's first modern feminist this much-deserved acknowledgement. Yet is it enough? Probably not. It is a lesser-known fact, for instance, that Savitribai was a poet of great substance, a master of her craft. When one considers the other more celebrated accomplishments of her life, her pioneering of education for women and the lower castes, and the very difficult times she lived in, the late 19th century saw an India steadily more impoverished and culturally threatened. Her voice is truly astounding. It is at the least a serendipitous happening, if not a divine intervention, then, that my maternal grandmother Ayya's humble one-room kitchen apartment on the ground floor of the PCMC building in Gunspate is merely a stone's throw away from the iconic Phulewada Museum and Memorial, one-time home to Savitri and Jyotiba Phule. Naturally, these great social reformers were a household name, at least in the Abnave clan that my mother belonged to. It is through the great Savitribai that I owe my life and career, Ayya would often say to me as we walk past the Vada to the dairy to buy milk and yogurt. It is because of her that a Dalit girl like me could go to school. Naturally, I grew up curious about her life and her work. I understood early on that she changed the course of my grandmother's life and in turn the life of everyone who followed, including myself. Whatever I am today, I owe to Savitribai. This book is merely a small token of my gratitude to this great woman. For in the process of studying her poems and translating them, if I have succeeded in inculcating in myself even an iota of her poetic, intellectual, and spiritual depth, I shall have amassed a vast and eternal wealth. To start, let me read Savitribai's own introduction to her work. I offer you these fragrant flowers strung together in a necklace of verse. These poetry blossoms so full of mirth, their scent will bring you peace within. This advice that delights in song is intelligible, affable in song, ethical, educational advice in song, knowledge connected to emotions in song. I praise those who by my side did stand, the missionaries I duly thank. This introduction to you I hand, please accept my offering. One thing that strikes the reader about Savitribai is how open she is to different cultures, different faiths. In this first poem we heard, she thanks the missionaries for the education she received in their schools. Here, she dedicates her work to Lord Shiva. He is truth, beauty, auspiciousness, magnificence. His head is bedecked with matted hair, from which the Ganga flows in excellence. He possesses the wisdom of 14 worlds, the three-eyed Lord with the Trinity on his brow. He is the destroyer of the three cities. He holds the wisdom of the three worlds. He is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The serpent sinuous dances on his shoulders. He is the Creator, creating creation. The beautiful blue-throated Lord possesses the 6 attributes of a god. A divine garland ornaments his neck. He is the master of the 64 arts, adorned by flowers that he frees from the cycle of life. He bestows complete knowledge upon the ignorant. He is the self-existent sign of the 4 ends of human existence. He is draped in tiger skin. This is the beauty of Shiva. Salutations to you, Lord Shiva. You are the beginning of creation. You are the self-existent leader. Bless us with the boon of destroying our ignorance. This is Savitri's prayer. Savitribai was one of those rare souls whose interest extended into every aspect of human life. And that is reflected in her poetry. In the unfortunately small selection that we still have, she touches on a wide variety of subjects. Education, of course, her personal life and background, the larger society, nature, everything comes into this small volume. We'll start here with her words about her roots. Naigaon is my maternal home, a small old village. I offer a paean to it. Ram's reign had monkeys, the Pandavas had foxes. From them descended the Ratthavanshi clan. Lord Shivaji established the kingdom of the Kunbi Marathas, home rule in the interest of its people. The little village of Naigaon was happy and prosperous. The Nevses were the Patils running the village. This is the family I was born to. This is where I took birth, and I salute this land with love, sing praises of it far and wide. The 12 Balutas and 12 Alutas, so many castes and creeds, in this land of Shivaji live happily. The rains are gracious and the crop abundant. Fruits and flowers hang adorning the well. Beautiful birds sing and butterflies flutter in delight. This is how nature inhabits the land. Here, the great King Bari became a philanthropic farmer. He blessed my homeland as though it were his Kashyapapur. We, his descendants, are uncomplaining in nature. This land of my birth tells me to grow flowers on her earth. I shower those blossoms back upon her. This depicts quite a happy childhood. But Savitribai is scathing about the caste system. Here are 3 short and very powerful examples. He who plows the earth and farms is stupid, says Manu. Do not farm, says the Manusmriti, a religious command for the Brahmins. A Shudra takes birth. The previous life's sins are carried into this life by every Shudra. This social practice is designed to be unequal. The morals of the shrewd are inhumane. The farm is Brahma. It provides food and grains. Food is the supreme Brahma. The Shudra farms, therefore they eat. On a full stomach they beat the Shudra. Such is their arrogance. Like a drunkard speaks, they behave. See and hear the selfish ethics of these ever-preaching people. He who farms accumulates wisdom. May the knowledgeable Lord bless him. And lastly, here's a poem she wrote about her husband, Jyotiba Phule. I bow down to the feet of Lord Jyotiba. His sweet speech echoes in my mind. I serve the Mahar and the Mang with my attention on my favorite God. Serving the Dharma of truth gives satisfaction, it brings peace. Jyotiba's words echo in my thoughts. In them, I see the reflection of life itself. The honest servitude with which I work gives me the blessings of all humanity. This awakening comes from the experiences of Jyoti. I consider them constantly in my mind. I, Savitri. As an immigrant, I'm often asked where I come from. I kom uit India, I say, moving my tongue, holding my mouth in ways I am not accustomed to. My efforts are usually rewarded with honest sympathy. Nederlands is een moeilijke taal, I am told. Ja hoor, I agree with my admittedly confusing Indian head bobble and patiently wait for the natural follow-up question. Do you like it here? I am asked. Do I like it here? I say, as though the answer isn't premeditated, as though I'm thinking on my feet. Do I like it here? I repeat as I look up at the grey sky and sigh. I do like it. I do. But I miss the sun, I almost apologetically admit. And I miss the chai. And let me clarify, I don't mean the chai latte that you get at one of those fancy cafes in the city. That stuff isn't chai. That's just exorbitantly priced sweetened milk. Real chai is brown, like the color of the earth. And if you ever happen to find yourself in my neighborhood, I say, I'll make you a pot. And more often than not, people come. with a box of pralines or a block of Gouda cheese. It is heartening to see people going out of their way bearing local delicacies wrapped in a whole lot of questions, curiosities if you may. Curiosities about this mysterious land in the East, this country of gurus and call centers, Bollywood flicks and politics. We want to know more about your Indian culture, I am told. What is your cuisine like, I am asked, and I strive to answer everything with a pinch of salt and a healthy mix of spices. For if not impossible, it takes a colossal effort to truthfully represent an entire nation, a population of an astounding 1.4 billion and counting. And that's not counting all of us non-resident Indians, the horrid NRI strain, who breed little Indians who go on to get foreign passports. It's true. I have one of my own, 4.5 and so Dutch, she came out of the womb on a bicycle. A block of cheese in one hand and a stroopwafel in the other. These NRIs, I tell you. But again, that's another story for another day. The point is, there is no such thing as Indian culture or Indian food. There are too many of us for all of us to have anything in common. Anything but the sun, I say, and our love for chai. Nay, our obsession. Do you plan to return then? I'm often asked. And I bring up the government and other inconveniences, minor nuisances like the cost of primary education or the questionable state of healthcare. And suddenly I realize I belong nowhere. My loyalties are neither here nor there. You see, I don't feel as Indian as I did a few years ago when I first came here. And as much as I try, I will never feel as Dutch as my daughter, for instance. She often corrects me when I state India is my country of origin and says, "Nee mama, we're from Rotterdam. We wonen here in Holland. Dit is onze land." And I hope in the heart of my heart that the country feels the same about her. I hope that one day it doesn't matter where you come from or where you truly belong. For spaces like these, this room is living proof that we are in the midst of a process of creating a better world, a bigger world, a world that will one day not recognize borders, a world where passports will be a thing of the past. For as long as we are ready to share a cup of tea over some good old-fashioned spoken word poetry, and I admit we may not at first understand all the words. My accent may sound foreign to you. The way my tongue rolls may seem just a little odd, absurd even. But as long as we listen, not to judge or react, but with the simple and honest intent of understanding, as long as we stay open-hearted, it won't matter where we started, it won't matter where we plan to spend the days that remain, for in the end, all we really need are a few safe spaces, a few friendly faces, and yes, a good cup of chai, and some blue in our sky.
So listeners, that was Kavya Phule, a collection of poems written by Savitribai Phule and narrated and translated by Priyam Redican Chakne. This set of poems also includes a couple of poems written by Priyam Redican herself. Hope you enjoyed it. With this, we conclude our program for today. We will be back with another exciting episode of our English podcast, Kaleidoscope. Stay tuned as our next program follows.